Human rights has been my primary field here at Fordham, and in the work I did previously. I taught a human rights clinic and directed the Human Rights Institute at Columbia, and before that was a litigator on constitutional rights. And so I had spent many years engaged in human rights, either as a practitioner, a litigator, an activist, and since joining the faculty here at Fordham as a scholar and teacher. And I really love the issues. I'm passionate about them. And it was transitioning into government was just an opportunity to try to see how these issues play out in the front line around the globe, to try to put some of these ideas into practice. I worked in the Secretary of State's Policy Planning Office, which is the think tank for the State Department. My portfolio was human rights, women's issues, and international organizations. The Secretary and the President both, it was very important for them to re-engage with international organizations and also to integrate women's rights into our foreign policy, and to improve our engagement in human rights throughout the UN system. So it was a time of a lot of excitement and energy and activity in all of those areas. So it was when I was about 2 years into my job at the State Department that the job at the White House became available. I had already been working very closely with my colleague, my predecessor in the White House, from having worked in the State Department in a coordination position. So it was a great transition, but nice to have had more frontline work before going to the White House. My job was as Director for Human Rights, which involved coordinating human rights policy across the interagency. And I also tended to focus, I was there during the Arab Spring, summer, and fall, so a lot of the work was on human rights and democracy issues as they were unfolding in Egypt, Bahrain, Yemen, Libya, Tunisia. It was a very busy time and a really challenging time because a lot of our relationships with countries in the region, a lot of our policy positions were under review, and being a part of that conversation was very important to make sure that those issues were front and center as we were re-examining our relationships with countries in the region. One of the most meaningful moments for me of working in the White House during the Arab Spring was the fact that the president really showed leadership in trying to put human rights and democracy as part of our rethink around security and stability in the region. He realized early on that people's ability to participate in a meaningful way in their form of government was key to guaranteeing the security and stability in those countries. And so I was able to organize his first meeting in the Oval Office with activists from the region, one from Egypt and one from Tunisia. And these were just regular people, but frontline people who showed incredible courage in that moment. And so I escorted them to the Oval Office, and he met with them, and it was really a way of reflecting his commitment to these issues. I'd like to bring my experience from the State Department and White House into the classroom in my human rights classes. One class in particular I teach is a smaller class, a seminar class, that I often teach as a traditional paper writing class. I've taught it before as a policy class where students work on actual policy projects. During the 2008 presidential election, the students worked on transition papers, proposals for the new president. And now coming off my government experience, I think it's a great way to teach students in a more experiential way, a more hands-on way, where they have an opportunity to work on actual policy projects. It's also a way for me to stay connected with policy issues, particularly where we have old traditional human rights issues like freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and new issues involving communication on and offline with technology, one of the issues I worked on in the State Department. So I'm looking for a way of marrying up theory and practice so that students can engage human rights policy, both the ideas behind human rights and the way it plays out in policy.